Trump administration claims that it only goes after undocumented immigrants who are guilty of committing crimes or suspected of committing violent acts in the United States. But more and more examples show that ICE is specifically targeting all undocumented immigrants, especially when they're in incredibly vulnerable situations. Recently, ICE detained a man who was driving his wife to the hospital to give birth to their child. CBS News has more on this.
Surveillance video shows Maria del Carmen Venegas, 9 months pregnant and hysterical on the phone. ICE agents just arrested her husband, surrounding their car at a gas station while they were on the way to the hospital to give birth by a scheduled C-section. They asked if I could show some ID, she says. Then they asked for her husband's ID, which she says was at home. That's when ICE agents asked Joel Arrona-Lara to step out of the vehicle and took him into custody. Venegas had to drive herself to the hospital. He's never even had a ticket, she says. The police have never stopped him. Venegas says her husband has been in the U.S. for 12 years.
So ICE is saying that the reason why they arrested him is because he has a criminal issue in Mexico, right? That he's wanted in Mexico for some sort of crime, a homicide warrant. Now, his lawyer, the immigrant's lawyer, has looked into this. And by the way, authorities in Mexico are saying, we don't know what you're talking about. We haven't found anything like that. So it seems as though ICE is lying to make it seem as though this arrest was warranted. But this is what's going on. I mean, this is the kind of behavior ICE is engaging in. They don't care this woman's about to give birth. They don't care about the vulnerable situation that these individuals are in. They're gonna go ahead and arrest this guy and then also expect this woman to find a way to the hospital, which she drove herself to.
So I'm not as sure about this story, and I'll tell you why. So, I mean, a homicide is no joke. If he's wanted for murder, we're actually helping the government of Mexico by arresting him and bringing him back to justice. But the part that gives me pause, as it does for Anna, is why didn't you want to go back to his house and get his papers? I mean, at a bare minimum, I'd want to know that I got the right guy, and I've got this situation that's obviously not normal. He was about to take his wife to the hospital, and I might not believe him if I think he's a murder suspect, right? But I'd want to see his papers, make sure I got the right guy, and I'd care a little bit about his wife, who's obviously in a understandably hysterical situation where she's panicked about having to go and deliver without her husband. So I'd want to do a little bit more checking here. If it turns out he really is a murder suspect, and eventually Mexico, right now the consulate says we don't have information on that. But if it turns out he was, then you do have to arrest him. It doesn't matter how pregnant his wife is.
No, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, if there is evidence to indicate that he has a homicide warrant in Mexico, of course you arrest him. And then you ensure that the woman who's about to give birth, who's clearly in the country legally, is taken care of. But that's not what happened here. Right? And so that's the reason why I see this story as a massive red flag. Where's the evidence of this so-called homicide warrant? Why doesn't the Mexican consulate have any information about this? How does ICE somehow miraculously have information the Mexican consulate doesn't have? It seems as though they just targeted someone. The second he didn't have the ID or identification that they asked for, they decided to arrest him and just, brush this woman aside as they were doing it.
Yeah, so as we talk about all the time on the show, context is really, really important. So if you've got a warrant from Mexico, that should be fairly easy to prove.
Exactly.
And so that's why there's the red flag that Anna's referring to. It's weird. The Mexican consulate, you would imagine, would immediately go, "Oh, thank you. Yes, we had a warrant out for his arrest, and no, in this case, ICE did the right thing." Whatever. It's surprising. It's unusual for the Mexican consulate to not have that information, but it's possible. It's possible. Okay, and then secondarily, the context is ICE is going around nabbing people all across the country, even if they're nowhere near the border. Oftentimes without asking questions. Here's another case where they don't even bother to confirm that he's the right guy. They don't go back to see if he's a legal resident or not. He says he has papers at home. They don't bother to check. And in the context of all of the near kidnappings that ICE has done throughout the country, you see this story and you think, I'm not sure that I trust ICE. I think that is a very fair thing to say at this point. I know that there are some conservatives who say, if you're in a position of authority, I don't care what the context is. I always believe you. The government is always right, the police are always right, law enforcement is always right. Unless they're investigating Donald Trump, in which case it's a rigged witch hunt. But otherwise, I'm positive the cops are always right, no matter who they shoot or no matter who they arrest. Our job in the media is not to just trust official government sources, but to question that, to be watchdogs.
Right.
So this is a perfect case where it is fair to be a watchdog in this story. So we'll follow up and we'll see if they ever produce that warrant, or if no, as usual, unfortunately recently, ICE went and grabbed a guy because they've now been given a green light to go around targeting Latinos all across the country.
Did you know the TYT Network is now available on YouTube's new streaming platform, YouTube TV? Get access to full TYT episodes and exclusive shows by signing up for YouTube TV today. All new subscribers get a 7-day free trial, so head over to youtube.tv and search for TYT Network's channel.